Great. Hey, everyone, thank you very much for listening to me today. I'm going to talk about the TrialsTracker project. So the problem I'm going to talk to you about today is the suboptimal reporting of clinical trials. And I know we have a very diverse jury here, so just a little bit about what that means in the context of my work. Here's a quote from John Ioannidis saying, "Randomized controlled trials are the gold standard for evaluating interventions. Nevertheless, the utility of this excellent tool is contingent on how it is used." And that use is not simply implementing the RCT in the actual trial itself, but in this piece, and in a way I agree with, Ioannidis goes on to talk about how using them subsequently and how it is reported, and then how we use that reported to inform healthcare decision-making is a big part of how it is used. And unfortunately, a lot of evidence that's been collected over the past decade has told us that that use is suboptimal. We can see that these are all from roughly the past decade. They're all systematic reviews and meta-analyses, and a sampling of the conclusions. Our dissemination bias exists and is currently invalidating findings in systematic reviews and meta-analyses. Discrepancies between registered and published outcomes of clinical trials are common, and the completeness of reporting of trials remains suboptimal just in general. So our effort, meaning me and my larger team at the Bennett Institute and my advisor, Ben Goldacre's project to try to chip away at this is the TrialsTracker project. And this project is really founded in sort of the larger ethos of the Bennett Institute, which is to combine clinical expertise, so with doctors and pharmacists and people who work in the field, with content expertise, which is people like me, who know a lot about the policy space, or epidemiologists and have that statistical knowledge, things like that, and technical expertise, which in our case is very often software developers who are creating tools and resources alongside our traditional analyses to help us expand the reach or expand the capabilities of our work. So the TrialsTracker project has a couple different strands that we've worked with over the years, but I'm going to focus on our work on checking automated compliance with reporting regulations. So basically, in the US and the EU have very established regulatory regimes for clinical research. And they say, we need you, if you're conducting a clinical trial and covered under our laws, you need to register them on a clinical trial registry to put a flag in the ground and say, we're conducting this study, and this is what we're going to look at. And you should be doing that prospectively, so before the trial starts. In the US, we have the FDA Amendments Act 2007, and it's implementing regulations, and we have a whole hodgepodge of stuff in the EU, which would take me a whole nother 10 minutes to talk you through, but just know that it exists there as well. And this is what we made. We made the FDA, as we lovingly call it, TrialsTracker, and we have individual trial-level data on who's reporting and who isn't under the law, and the requirement in the US is 1 year from primary completion. So I wrote code that takes the logic of what trials are covered from the law, translates it into a Python algorithm, not like a machine learning algorithm, but just merely a bunch of logic, and then runs against the entire clinicaltrials.gov database. We have the capability to do it every workday. And then it produces these summary outputs. You can aggregate by different sponsors. You can see across the entire data set. You can see we have about 3,000 trials that are due missing results, and and it's about three quarters are reporting and about a quarter isn't. And then another neat thing we do is we tally up sort of how much money with perfect enforcement that the US government could have fined everyone for doing this. And you can see this has been running since 2018 when the sort of most recent regulations came into effect, and that number is approaching $40 billion, and exactly zero of it has been collected. But by running this, right, we have sort of inherently longitudinal data about what's going on with enforcement. And we can, this is when we looked in September 19, so we launched in March 2018, and this is what we've published on this. And you can see at that point, we were seeing about 1,400 unreported trials, about 64% had results at any time, but only 41% were meeting that 1-year deadline I talked about. So over half of all trials being reported in the US directly to the registry, independent of whatever ends up in the literature, are failing the legal requirement. And when you continue this chart on into the future, those trends all continue. That red line hits that 75%-ish number we saw from before. That 40% number isn't getting any better, and the cumulative number of unreported trials keeps going up to about the 3,000 plus we saw earlier. And no one else is doing this. The FDA is in charge of making sure that this is enforced, and this is all they've admitted publicly in terms of people who have violated the law. 4 trials, people they've sent letters to in the last 2 years, that's it. And even if we're wrong, which I don't think we are, but even if we're wrong about those 3,000, it's a lot more than that, and even more than that are late. We do this in the EU as well. The EU Clinical Trial Register is where we get our data from that, and we do, once again, sponsor-level compliance, and you can click on any of those sponsors and see trial by trial. And when we wrote this up, when we launched this in late 2018 in the BMJ, the UK Parliament took notice, and a committee at the UK Parliament was interested in research integrity as a topic, and they ended up sending letters to every university, public university, and NHS hospital that conducts trials in the UK, and said, hey, just so you know, these people at Oxford took a look. You aren't reporting your trials. You're supposed to. We're still part of the EU. We haven't left yet at the time. You should do this. And it worked remarkably well. So January 2018 is when we took our initial sample that we published. And then November 2022 is obviously the most recent data we have. And we had a few high-performing universities back then, but everyone was abysmal. This is every UK sponsor that had at least 50 trials on the registry, and now everyone is fantastic. Royal Marsden coming in last at 82.8%, but even that would be leading most institutions throughout the rest of Europe. It's really, really excellent and unbelievable results. But it's not applicable everywhere. You can take other countries as a bit of a negative control. These are some of the worst performing of those major sponsors, and it's a lot of sponsors in France and Italy have not taken these requirements very seriously. But even this has improved quite a bit through to the attention brought to it by our work and people who have taken our work and tried to do advocacy and activism locally with that work. So what's the work I'd like to do moving forward that I would to build out this project more and continue it? Well, these are the 3 goals that I'm sort of proposing to move forward with the next phase of this project. So first, we're maintaining this existing infrastructure and then expanding what we already have to cover new areas. So maintaining any ongoing application like this incurs some amount of technical debt. And we have some amount of sustainability built in by the expertise within our team, but all the people who built this, my colleagues on the technical side, who made it a living thing on the internet, are now funded to work on other stuff. So we I'm able to slap together favors and stuff within the team to keep this running when something goes wrong, but lots can change over time, and it's amazing that it's taken such little upkeep over the past 4 years that it has, but we can do a lot more future-proofing and a lot more investment in this infrastructure. But in my thesis, my doctoral thesis, I also showed that there's quite a bit of capacity to expand this. There are other measures. Right now, we just look at did you report, did you not? And did you report on time, at least in the US? But we could expand that to other measures of compliance that are within the law. Did you register your trial? They don't actually require perspective. It's just within 21 days of starting. But did you meet that requirement? Are you updating your record as often as you're supposed to? And there's other measures that we could implement and track longitudinally over time. But turning that into a live tracking website requires time and effort and skill. In addition, there's evidence that sending people little reminders to say, hey, you have a trial that's overdue, or you have a trial that's coming up to report, you should do that, is effective. A group in France did an RCT on this and showed some effects, and I think we are sort of perfectly positioned to build out that infrastructure as part of our trials trackers. And that's something I think we could implement relatively easily with the resources to do so. Building on that, I want to harness the content and technical expertise that does exist on our team and build new tools and services. So the EU Trials Tracker that I talked about is going to become sort of deprecated, might be not quite the right word, but basically the EU CTR next year is supposed to stop taking new registrations because it's been supplanted by new EU regulations. This 2014 regulation, which only came into effect at the beginning of this year. We have this new CTIS registry, this clinical trial information system. It only has 88 records now because you can still use the old way, and most people don't want to switch to the new way yet, but that will take off and cover the entirety of the EU and the subsequent nations, the related nations soon, and there'll be new data streams and new ways of translating this into a whole new tracking website. So that's what a record looks like. And then lastly, I just want to make the point that ongoing tools allow for longitudinal public audit, continued research and development, and opportunities for advocacy and collaboration. We're investing in infrastructure here that begets lots and lots of future research. My entire doctoral thesis was built off of building these trials trackers and then just looking at the interesting research questions that came from it and the questions I could answer with the expertise that came from building this. And in my application for this award, I talked a lot about our COVID trials tracking and how that sort of emerged from this expertise and as how something we'd like to build upon. We tracked over 2,000 COVID clinical trials for if, how, when they were reporting, and the ability to invest in this allows us to continue to expand and grow and validate data sets and projects like this. So by investing in this infrastructure, we can grow things in ways that that haven't even been foreseen by me or anyone else yet, but they emerge from investing in this kind of work. Just to reiterate those points, and thank you all for listening.